If you swear, we can bleep it. We've done it before. And that's totally fine.
I'm usually pretty controlled with that, unless it's like I have book club tonight with my friends, so that's a safe environment.
Yeah, right.
To just
Well, and that is the I'm glad you used that word, safe, because that's actually a key to any kind of environment with this, is you feel safe enough to be able to open up, and so I feel like we've won. That's a win. We celebrate the wins, right?
Yeah.
So there you go.
Our goal is not to have anyone lose a license today, so
that's
okay. So I feel like that's a pretty low bar.
Yeah.
So let's just.
At least in Foursquare, right?
She works in the district. She works in the district office. She knows.
I know the things you can get away with and not lose your license.
Welcome back to the Ministry Without Hating It podcast, a ministry of Odyssey Haven coaching and counseling dedicated to the pursuit of answering the question, is it possible to do ministry without hating it? We have a theory that it just might be. And Brenton,
yes,
after today's interview, I feel like we moved the needle, for me even personally, more towards the ministry without hating it.
Yeah. It was a great time, and I'm inspired, and I can't wait to have our guest back.
Yeah, he said all that, and we haven't even said her name. Today,
I know, I'm teasing it.
Today, we have the privilege of sitting down with Pastor Molly DuQue. Molly is she said, well, all I can think of is the Office reference now.
Yeah, the regional branch manager for Jesus, but it's probably the regional to the branch manager for Jesus.
The assistant to the assistant, shrimp bucks included. Now, she is an associate supervisor for the Foursquare denomination over a district that she is in, up there in the Pacific Northwest-ish kind of area. But she's also a church planner, been in ministry for, we found out, over 25 years, and just brings a wealth of wisdom. But I think you're going to see, as you find within this interview, she is in a space of self-awareness, of continually growth in self-awareness that just really lends itself to a lot of great wisdom and towards the answering the question, how do we do this without hating it, right? So
yes,
I say Brenton literally went out of the frame for a second, and this is staying in.
Yeah,
this is staying in.
He
popped out, and I was like, "How much longer do I have to tease this out?"
Yeah,
till he pops back up and into the frame.
I'm still here.
That's great. You're
doing
here.
Jumping jacks or something.
Yeah. Well, listen, we've had enough pre-set up nonsense. We're both really, really excited for you to hear this interview with our friend Molly DuQue. So, without further ado, let's get to the conversation. Well, it is my privilege to welcome our friend. Well, my friend. Bren's going to get to know her.
Yeah.
But this is Pastor Molly DuQue. Molly, thank you for being here. Welcome to the Ministry Without Hating It podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this topic.
Whoa. You have a topic already?
Well, I thought it was ministry without hating it. Isn't that the topic of the whole podcast?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess you put it that way. Yeah. I thought maybe it's topic specific, whatever, totally nerdy. All right, here's the deal. So we like to start off by asking questions that have nothing to do with ministry, but need to be asked anyway. And so one of our new favorite ones to ask is describe yourself in 3 words.
Describe myself in 3 words. Wound too tight.
All right.
Is that fair?
Yep. So now you get to give us some context.
Yeah, brutally vulnerable right there.
Yeah. That was
We're
good.
going deep, super fast.
Yeah.
We usually do.
I'm in a unique season of convergence, right? Like, so when I turned 40, I'm 46 now, I started this journey of self-discovery. So I did all the assessments, right? Like you name them, I've done them. And then that sort of led to a lot of therapy. Because when you learn that much about yourself, you're like, I need somebody to process this with. And then I'm just in this season where I'm like, this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be. And then a lot of convergence of seeing all the dots connected. So, but But I know that about myself. I'm aware of it. And I'm like sort of working on it.
Okay. Sort of.
I mean, it is like part of like the source of my powers, right?
Right.
Too. So it's like that balance. Yeah. But I'm wound pretty tight, but I'm aware of it and I'm working on it.
That's good. It's funny you mentioned the assessments, because I remember when I first met you, it's just been a few years ago. I was just coming into the Enneagram, and you were like a total student of it at that point. And I remember spending time with you and going, all right, I need to learn more about that. And you're so right. When it comes to that level of self-awareness, you're just like, man, I suck and have a lot of work to do. Yeah. And so,
yeah, totally it's a dark journey.
But there is hope.
There is.
Maybe.
Jesus meets you in the dark places.
Okay, there we go.
You see that like jump?
Those
yeah, just like connected the dots right there.
Yes, that was good. Yeah. You are definitely a pastor. I appreciate it. That's good. That's good. All right, so not to go from something so deep, and man, I almost don't want to ask this, but if you're a DJ, what's your DJ name?
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you, but I don't think you're asking me the right question. Okay, so my DJ name would be obviously DJ Mega Molly.
Okay,
I love it.
Right? Obviously, yeah, obviously.
But like, so I went to high school and college in the 90s, and then in the 2000s, I married a musician. So what you should be asking me is what my emo band name would be.
Oh, all right.
So.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, what is that?
It was, and I've actually put a lot of thought into this. So my emo band name would be Ocean of Tears.
Ocean.
And it would be like half my face, and like there'd be like a teardrop coming down, but like filling the ocean.
Yeah.
With my tears.
I can visualize that. That's fantastic.
So we've gone from wound too tight to Ocean of Tears.
So you're like seeing like all the facets of my broken psyche.
This is going to be a great interview. I'm so excited to even ask this next question. Is if your life was captured in the expectation versus reality meme, what would the two pictures be?
Okay, so you can see like behind me, this is my office, right? Mm-hmm. And it's strategically built to fit the frame of a video call.
Okay.
Right. So it's like organized. There's pictures over here. I'm going to just show you because I can.
Oh, okay.
So this is a corner of our playroom, right? Okay. So like it's fairly clean today, but there's swings and there's a bunny that lives in here with me.
A bunny.
And he's actually sitting. My kids have a bunny, but he's sitting behind me just shredding paper. So if you can like hear it, I can like move him, but like
I cannot.
You know, I mean, this is like what people see, but truthfully, like it's just messy. Life's just messy.
Yeah.
You know, and you have kids and you have pets, and like nothing quite works together the way it's supposed to. And like we ordered a couch last week, which we were very excited. It was like a grown-up decision, and it was like the couch with the chase. And when it showed up, we just ended up with 2 chases. So they sent us like 2 right halves of the couch, and we're like, "This is our life. This is our life. This is like the quintessential DuQue life: 2 right halves of a couch."
I have to say I appreciate your self-awareness already. This is really, it's refreshing. So thank you for that. Even in the silly questions, you're going right at it. So then, what is the best piece of feedback that you've ever received?
You know what? The very best thing that anybody's ever said to me is they've told me I'm a great mom.
Oh, nice.
Like I love, like that means so much to me. And that comes partly from like my own, like reconciling, you know, when you reconcile your own story, right? And you kind of dig into the darkness of like maybe what was lacking in your own journey. To have somebody tell me I'm a great mom, like that's the thing that's most important to me in my life, is to like love my kids really, really well. And they'll probably have to go through their own therapy someday of like my mom over nurtured me My mom hugged me too much. My mom told me my mom just like smothered me. But man, I'd sure like rather, if I'm going to err on something, it's going to be like loving the heck out of my kids and like being super present and like telling them like how freaking awesome they are and how like the world is better because they're in it, not because of anything they do, but because they exist in the world.
Yeah.
Don't you love to see them light up when you start talking to your kids like that? I notice that with my own, like when I start just speaking life over them, their eyes get big and they're like, really? Really? And those are some of the best things that you can see. I love it.
Last night, like I've got my kids are 9 and 12, little girls. And my 9-year-old, like she just wants to be with me all the time.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I love most of the time. And so we're like watching Amazing Race together, and there's this like scene where they like get the baby goats, and she's like, baby goats sound like meh. And then she's like, Mama, let's go like meh to each other to tell each other that we love each other. So all night she's like meh, meh, meh. And I just like, I'm excited to talk about ministry, you guys. I think it's so important. And I think like we get to co-sojourn with God in the work that he's already doing in the world. But man, like there's just stuff that's really, really important. And that's like us getting to like raise kids to have like a healthy Christ-centered identity and look in the mirror and like who they see. Like when we think of the world that we live in, there's a whole lot that works against kids, especially girls in our culture. Right. Yeah. And so you want to hear me be passionate? Like, let's talk about our preteen girls. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm right in there. So
same.
So go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just did, but
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's an interesting season because I'm finding I have to the way I relate to them changes, and I knew that was coming because we've been through obviously different stages as they're growing older and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's just I hate to say it this way, but it's a different beast altogether when it comes to it. But yeah, that's good.
I'm just noticing like the transition. So I have a 14, a 10, and a 5-year-old, and
oh man,
all girls. And so I'm noticing the transition of like my oldest becoming a daddy's girl who was a mommy's girl, and my middle who is totally a mommy's girl, but will be transitioning as she grows up a little bit. And I'm noticing these just little things, and I'm like, yes, I can't wait for these moments.
Yeah.
And these just the things that are coming, and it's an exciting thing. Chad, you're right there. Our kids are like great friends, and
14, 12, and then I have a boy, and there are times where he and I are like, all right, we're out of here, let's go.
Yep.
So that's good.
There's times where I do that too. I'm like, going to the garage, see ya.
But I love it. I'm actually really enjoying this season. And it's actually helping me to process even my own emotions. It's really easy to go, oh, it's so emotional. But it's like, I love what you said, reconciling my own story. Like that resonates with me, especially when it comes to interacting with how I engage with my children and that kind of thing.
Right. And our stories like aren't our kids' fault. And so sometimes we have to make sure that like we do our work so we don't project something onto them that's not fair. Yeah. Right. And like,
that's good.
My kids don't need to know all the ins and outs of my story. They will someday. Right. But I find that I have to like catch myself because I travel a fair amount for my job. And if I'm not careful, I will get like anxious when I'm traveling about my relationship with them because I'm not there with them in person to be able to look them in the eye, to like hug them, to like engage with them. And so it's so interesting. Like as our kids age, like if we let it can be a space that's like deeply healing and growing and revealing for us as adults.
Yeah. Yes. That's really well said. Yeah. I'm just waiting. You look like you're sitting with it, so I was just letting you be there. That was good.
No. So can that? Well, it can take like I hear that and I'm like I have a lot of work still to do.
Yeah.
I got a lot of healing I still need to walk in. And anytime we sit. So one of the things that I've noticed about our podcast is we start talking with people and we go to these places. I'm like, and now I'm in therapy. They just don't know it.
Brenton is very introspective. There are times where you have something to say. I'm like, nope. And that's it. Just nope. Nope. Okay, great.
Well, I always have something to say, but it doesn't necessarily add.
Brenton, do you know what your Enneagram number is?
I think so I took a test a while back. I probably need to redo it, but it was a 3-2.
He does it. And I learned from you, Molly, not to type people, and learned that the hard way later in life with some other interactions that I had. But anytime he goes, I think, I go, you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know.
No. Yeah. When you can't do a test, like a true student of the Enneagram, it's a journey of self-discovery.
That's right. That's right. It's the truth.
Okay.
It's the
so
truth.
you think maybe you're a 3?
Yes. Just in some of the ways that I approach things, but he says no all the time.
I don't think he's I don't think he's a 3. No, cool, because you're a 3, right, Molly?
I am a 3 with a 2 wing.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh. And it's like a dark pit of shame being an Enneagram 3.
Like I noticed some of the negatives, probably more so than like I will be so overly focused in taking people from one place to another that I will blow people up in the process or just run them over. If you didn't get on board with me, see ya, I'm going. And I do that often. But I know this enough to not do it to my friends.
Okay, so you've got some self-awareness in there. I don't know, maybe you're an 8. I don't know. So like a 3.
He said that too. So
yeah,
But you could be like a healthy 3. Like so in seasons where I'm feeling like really great and like balanced and secure, like you'll lean towards a healthy 6. I am in a season where I just really love my friends. And so a 6 is a loyalist.
I'm a 6. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love my friends, and I especially love my friends that could care less what I do for a living or what I do in ministry. Yeah. Like Foursquare could burn to the ground today and they could care less.
Yeah.
Right. And so like people that like love you, like just for you.
Yeah.
That don't have any, like no bearing, there's no dual relationship, so when I think about like even this conversation about ministry without hating it, like being able to have a life apart from it and people that care about you without any ministry strings attached is incredibly important.
Yes. Yes. That's good. Well, and as a 6, that obviously resonates with me a lot because I go to the person first, outside of anything they do for me or who they are, but who they are to me. One of the reasons, though, I know he's not a 3 is because I know I slide 3 in unhealth, and I know that's my dark side, and that's where I know that I'm not in a good place is when I'm trying to achieve and trying to I measure my success based on what I've gotten done and that kind of thing. And this just became a typology podcast. It's what just happened here, Brenton, where we try to figure you out. But we'll send you some links.
I'm open book. I mean, I'll talk about anything. So feel free to unpack whatever. And
unfortunately, we interviewed you in the very first episode, and today we have Molly DuQue with us.
There it is.
So
bringing it back.
Let me pivot for just a second, and we may get to some of these other fun questions peppered in within. But you mentioned do what you do for your work. You travel. Talk to us or explain to us what your ministry role is, because that has shifted a little bit, and then we'll dive into what ministry even looks like for you right now. But what is it? What's your official title, and what do you do? What's your role?
Yeah. So I am an Associate Supervisor for the Northwest District of Foursquare. So a lot of what I do is working with churches and pastors, helping them be healthy and whole. So some of that is logistical things. Like when a church walks through a transition, a pastor retires or steps down for some reason, and that church needs a new pastor. A lot of what I do is church health issues. Ideally, you always want to help a church before they're standing on the edge of a cliff.
Yeah.
Right. And so the more that we can instill healthy culture, healthy rhythms, like clear expectations within leadership teams. One of the things that we see pastors lacking a lot is tools for conflict resolution. That's a common theme. If there's any common theme in Foursquare pastors, we need help resolving conflict. But I was on it to explain my job. I was on a flight a little while ago, and I was trying to explain to the guy next to me what I do for a living, and he's in the marketplace. And so I told him what I do, and he looks at me and he's like, "Oh, you're a regional branch manager for Jesus."
Oh, love it.
I was like, "Yep, that is like a very fair assessment of what I do."
Did you hand out Shroot bucks at that point? Wow.
Yes, I'm the assistant to the
assistant
Associate Supervisor of Foursquare.
Okay, so how long have you been in that role now?
So I've been doing this for, oh my gosh, this summer will be 3 years.
3 years. Okay. And so I'm curious how because when I met you, you were not that. I'm curious how you found yourself where you are now. And if you want to go back a little ways on some of your ministry journey and how you found yourself where you're at, I would love to hear that story.
Yeah. Well, I am, let's start with what I've learned about myself in 25 years of ministry.
Okay.
Truthfully, I'm not a great maintainer. If I'm being very honest, I'm not a great pastor. I'm a good leader. I'm a good builder. I'm a good entrepreneur. So the longest thing I ever did was plant a church. And I planted and led a church for 5 years, but I've never served in any ministry role longer than 5 years. Most of them were closer to 3. I just really like doing new things. I like taking something that has a problem and fixing it. So I've done all the things, like all the world of the church I've done, with the exception of worship, because that would bless nobody. Right? I was even like I was a kids pastor for 7 weeks at one point. So I did everything, and then was an executive pastor at a church out in Seattle for 5 years, and then planted a church. And so we moved to Bozeman in 2017, beginning of 2017, and ended up planting a house church network before there was even language to describe it. So my ministry partner, Angela, and I, we saw some deficits in the church. But we weren't necessarily jaded by them. We were just like, hey, let's try something new. And we were also in a position where both of our husbands were great earners. And so we didn't have to get a church up and running in 9 months to be able to feed our family. I mean, those are very real challenges.
Yes.
That people face in church planting, right? So we're like, hey, we know, and 90% of pastors will tell you, life change happens in smaller environments. Yet we still put most of our time, people, power, and resources into Sunday services.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So we're like, well, let's just try something different. So we moved to Bozeman and we planted this house church network before there was even language to describe it. And Foursquare didn't really have any resources for us. There was no training or language around that. So we started looking outside of Foursquare for community and just help and information. And in doing that, began to find other people that were doing what we were doing. And then we're like, oh, we're not the inventors of house church networks.
Yeah.
And did you have, I don't know if I've ever heard why you picked Bozeman. Did you have any kind of previous anything there?
No.
Or is it just like, that looks like a good place, let's go there?
No, we came to Bozeman because we were asked to come to Bozeman. Okay. So when I was an executive pastor, I thought that I just knew, how you go through these seasons where something is stirring in your soul. Mm-hmm. And so I went and I went and I talked to my pastor and I was like, hey, I think it's time for me to go do whatever's next. And he gave me his blessing. And so I called our district supervisor at the time. It was Dave Veach. Mm-hmm. And I said, hey, I think it's time for me to lead a church. And literally the first thing he said to me was, we would love to plant a church in Bozeman, Montana, and we think you'd be great at it. And my response was no. So we said no for like 6 months. We're like, we don't want that. Just give us like a little church and, we'll try and like revitalize it. And
Sure.
so that summer we ended up driving out to Bozeman, like literally just to honor our leadership, because I think sometimes we need to be willing to explore something, right? Even if we think it's completely outside of our skill set or what we would want to do. Yeah. So I think we let them pay for our hotel, but we didn't even let them pay for anything else because we just knew like it wasn't going to be Bozeman. And then we got here and we're like, shoot,
yeah,
like this is not what we expected. So we like walked the streets and our kids were little. I mean, we had a baby at that time and walked the streets and went home and we didn't even know what to do with that because we hadn't really allowed our hearts to be open to the idea of that. Sure. And then that summer, I ended up writing 2 different church planting proposals. One was for Bozeman and one was for Issaquah, Washington. Mm-hmm. And there were so many things wrong with Issaquah, Washington. It just was not like. And then
the city or the proposal?
Just us in the city. Issaquah's great. Issaquah's amazing.
Sure. I've never even heard of it, but okay.
It was like not a good fit, but there was like a building there. We could have my husband could have kept his job. They would have given us a building. We would have had people. But like I had dreams that like we couldn't afford a place to live and we had to live in the church building and then the building collapsed and killed our children. Like weird stuff happened like that. Yeah. And then no joke, at the end of the summer, like we spend the whole summer like praying, writing these proposals. One day my husband cast lots.
Oh.
No joke.
I mean, I'm from Vegas, so go ahead. This is fine. This is fine with me.
He put Issaquah and Bozeman in a hat and picked Bozeman out. And he's like, I think we're supposed to go to Bozeman.
Amazing.
So over the course of the next 4 months, we sold everything and we moved to Bozeman and we love it. Like we really feel like, I will tell you this, man, like I think when you take a risk and you follow Jesus, Jesus shows up.
Yes.
He shows up.
Definitely.
Like he 100, and that's not like, we are not talking prosperity gospel. We are not talking if you do for God, he'll do for you. Mm-mm. If you step out in faith and you follow Jesus, he will go before you and he will show up. Now that will look like all sorts of different things, but like, man, we love Bozeman and we're still super committed to Bozeman. Like it's no secret. I don't plan on doing this like corporate job forever.
Yeah.
Like that. I tell my boss that all the time. Like I got a shelf life, because I love my city. Mm-hmm. Like I love this city and our work here is not done.
Yep.
So there will come a day where like, I'm back in Bozeman full time. And I don't know what that'll look like. I'm not like, should we plant another church? Like, what should we do? Who knows? Mm-hmm. Like, but like we love it. We love it here. And we're like super committed to the work here. So we ended up, so your original question was how I ended up in this job.
Well, yeah. And I mean, we'll get to, I definitely have some more questions about Mosaic Chapel for sure, but go ahead.
Yeah.
So we were like, I don't know, 4.5 years in, and I just started feeling itchy, like it's just how I'm wired. I was just like, was feeling froggy. And I was like, it's time to jump, And so I had but I like felt super bad about that. Right. Like, and this is one of the things we navigate in ministry is like, I made a commitment.
Right.
And I need to see my commitment through.
Yeah.
So I called Dave Edler, right? A different Dave. We have so many Daves.
A lot of Daves up there. Okay.
So I called Dave Edler and just in tears, and I just like unloaded how I was feeling. And this is what he said to me. He said, Molly, it sounds like you made a commitment in your heart to do something that maybe Jesus didn't ask you to do.
Oh.
Yeah. So then of course I like cried the rest of the day, and I'm not much of a crier. So like if there's crying involved, there's usually like something pretty deep happening in me. Yeah. So then I got asked to take this job. So I was offered this role in the middle of all that. And, we just felt like it was the right thing. So we actually Justin quit his job when I took this one. So he was the charge nurse at a surgical center in town. He quit that job and just works there part-time now to be able to manage my work schedule. So we cause for us, we weren't going to trade time with the kids
Yeah.
for me to
Right.
be able to do this job. Like that for us, that was the most important thing.
Yeah.
So they actually like have a dad now that's like super present. So he makes school lunches and takes him to school and picks him up and is with him full time when I'm traveling for work. And so it's been really cool. They've been able to foster like a super rich relationship that I'm not sure like would have happened at their young age if I was
Yeah.
home full time.
So you said something that really, actually, it's really interesting, hit me, and where we've been at with our family recently, because we had a somewhat similar where we went to a place to plant a church that ended up becoming a lot like the model that you, and this is before pandemic, that you did there in Bozeman. But we also felt very clearly that we were done. And that's when Cedar Rapids and Iowa came on the forefront. And it's now been 3 years for us, over 3 years. But it's real weird. And I can't even tell you where it's come from recently with the kids. Even the conversation of the same, like, well, we abandoned them, or we just up and left, kind of a thing. And it was like, well, hold on a second. We all heard very clearly you guys were involved with that, because it was definitely a family decision and prayer. But when you said, you may have made a commitment in your heart that Jesus didn't ask you to make, it's like, because we used to say, because we've had a kind of a nomadic ministry life since we've been married, especially with the kids. It's been somewhat similar. I think the most we've been in one place was 4 to 5 years, and that's physical locations. And so when they would ask when we moved, like, are we moving again? And it's like, nope, we're not going any place. And we were real clear about that in Indianapolis. And then when we had to go, it was this, like you said, it was this guilt of leaving these people behind. But I only say all this because what you said actually ministered to me. So I wanted to say thank you, because now I have further conversation with our kids that I can go, oh, my friend Molly actually said, similar experience. So thank you for that.
Good. It's good. I'm
Chad,
glad.
I could probably connect some dots for you right here if you want.
Okay.
I have a similar story to you, Molly, where God called us across the country. We came out sight unseen. We came with an invitation, and immediately in our heart, we didn't want to leave where we were at, but knew the Lord was calling us. So we came out. And now, Chad, here's the dots connecting. As you stepped away, I now oversee that church in another. And it's really cool for my heart to see this little expression, because we've been overseeing a traditional style church in Indiana. And now I get to see another, and it has done my heart so much good to now be a part of that expression as well. And for our kids to see not just one model, but another. So your leaving has also ministered to us, even though I miss my friend.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Sorry, we're having a moment there, Molly. You can just wait just a second. That'd be great.
Yeah,
well, that's good. Thank you, Brenton. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, Molly, I'm curious. You've kind of seen a lot in a short period of time. I think what people would, especially those that maybe have gone before us, would say that's a shorter period of time, even though for some maybe younger, 25 years feels like a lot. I'm curious now where you're at. What does the word ministry mean to you? And maybe if you could even tell us how that's evolved over time because of your ministry journey.
Yeah. I think probably in the early years, ministry was really church centric, right? It was like what happened inside the walls of a church. It was usually attached to like a title and a responsibility. Especially when you're like a youth pastor, and then you've got your youth leaders, and they're responsible for these kids. There's a church centric definition to that idea of ministry. But I think like where I've come now, and I don't necessarily know if it's just been like the different roles that I've been in over the years. I think it's more like in my relationship with Jesus, this idea of ministry being like me living out the work that he's doing in me. Because what I would say is like, for me, one of the most important things in ministry, quote unquote, right?
Sure.
For me is the relationship with our neighbors. like the things that we have walked through with our neighbors, and being able to open our home to our neighbors. And I mean, even things that probably look a little bit more like ministry, like we ran book clubs with our neighbors in our garage during the pandemic, and some things like that. But you know, when our neighbor, like her baby came too early, right? So like she shows up on our porch with her 4-year-old and her 2-year-old, so we could like take them in. I mean, things like that where I'm like, for me, that's like the richest ministry expression. So it's like some of the stuff over the years that I've sort of thought about that probably brought me to that place is this idea of like, if the Spirit lives in me, where I go should look more like the kingdom of God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for me, ministry is the outworking of that. It's like, where I go, does it look more like the kingdom? And so even when I think about like the church world, like right now I've been in this kind of extensive research project on effective discipleship that we're going to share at our regional connects in a couple weeks. But like processing this idea, like when we think of the church, and I love the church, right? The church is like the one institution that Jesus created in his time here on earth. Like we can't throw out the church, right?
Yeah, right.
It's
right.
the gathering of the communion of the saints. But when I think about our role as pastors and this idea of ministry, like, are we helping people look more like Jesus, or are we creating good churchgoers? Right? Like are our measures of maturity, attendance, serving, and tithing? Those are wonderful things, right? Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, those are wonderful things, right? But somebody can do all of that stuff and still be a total jerk.
Yes. Yes.
Right? So really thinking through this idea of ministry, like, is my life in everywhere I go, and the people I'm engaging with, and whomever God is bringing into my path, and the responsibilities that I have, and the things that have the privilege of like touching and influencing, do they look more like the kingdom of God?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, when I think of ministry, and even as I work with people whose success is in the marketplace, who will never pursue being a church pastor, like, how do I even like support and help them and challenge them to do that in whatever circles of influence they have?
Yeah.
Right? So for me, ministry is like the Spirit of God working in me and through me to look more like Jesus, and then me having the ability to help the world around me look more like the kingdom of God.
I want to tie that back to something you said that's really interesting. I actually wrote it down because I wanted to ask you, listen to me. I want to ask you the question, but I wanted to ask you to maybe pull out a little bit more, because you had made a comment of part of your self-realization is you don't think that you're particularly a good pastor. Can you pull it out what that means? Because some of what you just said sounds like a pretty good pastor to me. And so I'm curious where the disconnect is, or maybe how you see it differently.
I mean, I guess that's maybe me being a little self-effacing, but when I think of a good pastor, because I think this word pastor we now use it to define all sorts of things, right? It's sort of this like conglomerate term.
Sure.
But when I think of a good pastor is a good shepherd, right? And a good shepherd like walks with people and sits with people and cares well for people and loves people really, really well, right where they're at. I tend to be like, you know what, buck up. That tends to be like, I'm just wired that way a little bit more, where I'm like, yeah, man, and I've worked hard. I'm working hard in this season, like being more present, like being a good active listener and all that. But like, it tends to be at the end of that type of a conversation, I'll be like, okay, yeah, that's rough, man. What are you going to do about it?
Yep.
What control do you have over this situation? What's your self-responsibility in this? Like, I'm even right now, like we're walking through, like I'm helping a church with a church health situation. And, the pastor called, and they were feeling like, really sad and down about this complaint that had come in about them. And my response to them was, take the time to really think about that. is there truth in that? Sure, some of it maybe is garbage, but some of it might be true, right? And my job is to help you move forward. So that doesn't feel good. It's not fun, right? But let's figure out how to move you past what created this conflict in the first place and help you move towards being a healthier pastor yourself with greater resilience, right? Because that's another thing that we struggle with, right? Having a soft heart and a thick skin.
Yeah.
We can tend towards one or the other.
That's right.
But man, we struggle living in the tension of those two things. And if there's anything a pastor needs in 2024, it's resilience.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's right.
So I just was like, I validated how they're feeling. I'm like, you know what? That sucks. It does suck when this stuff happens. Right. But you got to figure out what's true in it. Yeah. And then let's work together to move you forward so you can be healthier and your team can be healthier. So something like this never happens again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when I think of like, I'm just not I'm not a great shepherd but I'm okay with that.
But that's it. Okay. But I want to push back a little bit because I think you and I are wired a little bit in the same, because that still sounds like shepherding to me, because you can even still speak the truth and be, maybe what you're talking about is more of the, like you might see it as like a lack of compassion, but I don't know if it is, because I think it just manifests differently. So when I think of my wife she's a pastor, but she's also a licensed marriage and family therapist. She loves to go deep with people and figure that out. And I'm at the same part of it, just like, well, just stop doing that. And then, maybe things will be different, kind of a thing. But that's also two different mentalities, because I have more of a coaching, like what you're talking about, model. And there are some times where what is required is someone to sit in that space and to do the deeper surgery, I guess you could say. But I still think they're both pastoring and shepherding. Am I, Brenton, help me out. Somebody, come on, throw me a lifeline here.
I can hear what you're saying. I can hear what you're saying, because I do think it's one of the things that we need to consider in the church today when we think about what does it look like and what's the church's responsibility in helping people look more like Jesus. And even in that statement, right, there's we got to even define like, what's your responsibility and what's my responsibility in all of us looking more like Jesus. But I think one of the challenges the church is facing today is like historically around this topic of discipleship, and I'm just talking about like the last 50 or 60 years, but like the fixation tends to be on doctrinal development.
Yeah.
Right. You need to have good doctrine.
Yeah.
But I think where we're seeing a lot of lack is in character development.
Right.
That's right.
Right. Yes. Because if people in the church look just like people in the world, we've got a problem. And I think about things specifically around like, can we have a deep Christ-centered commitment to unity? Can we be deeply compassionate and accepting of people of all walks of life? Can we create room where anybody can come to the table? Can we be people who express deep value in others, even if they have different social and political beliefs from us, right? These are things that the church has been crucified for in modern times, right?
Sure.
And that a lot of that's our fault, right?
Yeah.
Because like the church is I just think we're not necessarily doing our due diligence to help people develop deep character.
That's good.
I wonder where that comes from, as how that where that not doing a good job developing deep character is that. Would you think that comes from just like being Sunday centric? Sunday or Wednesday night or whatever days rather than community? Or you can't probably sum it all up in just a couple of sentences, but where do you think some of that comes from, and not developing the character as opposed to the doctrine?
I think it's a couple things. I think one is our pastors aren't being discipled enough, or not discipling themselves enough, right? You can't lead somebody somewhere that you haven't been.
That's right.
Right. We
Yep.
know that discipleship is more than taught. Like our pastors have to be doing this deep heart work themselves, first and foremost. And then I think we have put, as Western evangelicals, we have put so much stock in the Sunday sermon.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's where we put all of our time, talent, and resources into developing that thing and like hitting it out of the park, and then having somebody come up afterwards and tell you, great word, Pastor.
Yes.
Great word. And it feels so good. It feels so good, right? Right. The
I had a lady.
Go ahead.
Oh, I had a lady do that on Sunday. I'm sorry. And she's like, good job, Pastor. And I was like, would you tell me if I didn't do a good job? And she's like, no, I'd just be quiet.
That's Midwest nice. That's what that is. Yeah.
But we somewhere along the way, we determined that was our greatest tool for seeing lives changed.
Yeah.
Right? When not only does secular research refute that,
right,
we know that just in conversations with people refute that. Like I teach one of our church planting classes. Like I teach one little unit, and truthfully, I don't even really teach it. It's just like a conversation, right?
Yeah.
So in that conversation, like, so whenever this same unit comes around, I always start by asking church planters the same question. And the question is, when you think back on your formative journey, what were the things that happened or the experiences that you had that led you to this place in your discipleship journey, where you are willing to risk everything and step out in faith to plant a church where you're inviting other people to have transformational relationship with Jesus? Not one of them ever said great Sunday preaching.
That's right.
Right.
That's so good.
No, I'm not dismissing it. But I do think we have got to start being more honest with ourselves about the value of that space. So I have a buddy, his name's Mike Gamble, and he works for Exano. We'll just call him out. He won't mind. Right. So Exano is like one of the biggest church consulting firms in the country. So this is what he does for a living, right? Is step into churches and assess and help them to be more fruitful. Mm-hmm. But he basically said Sunday services are fantastic places for creating common language, mm-hmm. creating unity, creating inspirational culture that points everybody in the same direction. Like it's really great for like this drafting effect. Like we're all going the same place together. He said, but it is not a big part of transformation.
Yep.
And so if we can start being more honest with ourselves about that, I think that we can begin to like move the needle forward in other spaces. And we just got to be more creative, right? Yeah. It can't just be traditional Sunday-centric churches and house church networks. Right? Like we just have to have a bigger imagination and a bigger like creative ability to figure out like, how do we get people into dialogical spaces that are safe, where relationships can go deep, they can be honest about where they're at. And then they can begin like to let the Holy Spirit, like let his roots go down deep into the bedrock of their soul, and begin to move them forward.
Well, and to kind of tie it into even the greater conversation of the ministry without hating what you were talking about, if my metric for success is basically attendance, then I'm going to live and die by that. And that's not something to base any kind of resiliency on, and what you're saying is it's like a recent, I don't say re-revelation because it's one I've had before, but one of just in this space. I had a moment just a couple weeks ago, and I've even begun the dialogue with our team here of back to the drawing board, because I feel like I've started to key myself towards, the Sunday and the message, and let that theme be all the way throughout the entire year, and make sure that we're on board, and like our focus this year is, maturing in Christ. But I haven't taken time to actually define what's the actual target within what a mature Christian, someone who's following Jesus, looks like. And it's like, I think you said earlier, oh, shoot, like, great, now what, but it's that self-awareness coming back to it of like, everything that you said is right on and exactly where I'm at. I agree with you. I agree.
Well, good, because I'm saying very wise things.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Well, and listen, I'm going to get I've coined this phrase as an Enneagram 6. I'm going to get 60 on you here for just a second.
Let's go.
Go back
Chad.
to why, even pushing back, because I do see you as a good pastor. And here's the loyalist right here. I'm not trying to tie it, but reaffirm, make sure you're not mad at me and everything's okay. But in all honesty, a lot of what you said, I do feel like that's some of the shepherding that is required nowadays, especially to be able to just call it right out and to say, okay, then what's the way forward? Here we are. So there you go. I think you're doing a good job. I think that's more than anything I wanted to say.
Thanks, Chad.
Oh, you're welcome.
I will receive that.
Good.
As an Enneagram 3, I will receive that affirmation.
Good. I want to talk a little bit more about Mosaic Chapel, and that was the name of the name, and I keep saying in past tense. And you can talk through some of the transition, because when I met you, I got to watch you present at one of our national Foursquare conventions about Mosaic Chapel and what you guys were doing, and we were pretty early into our church plant ourselves, and I was like, I don't know if we're hitting the mark that even we had set out. And so that was just a fresh new way of doing things. And I think it's a little bit more than just a house church network. So I wonder if you could just unpack what it was, because you talked about seeing some of the things that maybe just weren't full expressions of what you felt like was church and where that went. If you can just talk about that, because you also incorporated some of the elements of the big gathering as well that we talked about, and that it wasn't just throwing everything out and going, all right, we're on the house.
Yeah. Well, we called it hybrid missional, which what does that even mean? Right. Right.
It's a hybrid.
It's
prototypical.
Phrase. We call that hybrid missional. And somebody was like, that doesn't make any sense. It's like calling a human a bipedal. Like, just like come up with a better name to describe what it is you're doing. But what we did was we set out to plant, I wouldn't even call them house churches. Like, I mean, they were really just groups, right? They were groups that met weekly. People shared a meal and a discussion about God and faith. And then we had a large gathering once a month where all those groups came together. And we used that large gathering to have like a larger expression of worship and teaching. And then in that space, we practiced the sacraments, right? So we had communion, and we had a baptismal that was made out of like a water tank from a feed store. Like, it was real church planty.
Nice.
And there was some really, really incredible things that we saw happen in that space. The people that it attracted. And I think, if I'm honest with myself, I think part of this is the model, and part of this was the fact that I'm a woman. So, like, don't discount that piece in all of this, right? Because you're talking about a female church planter in Montana, right? So even Bozeman, which is a college town, most of the churches, at least half the churches here, are not egalitarian.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there was some dynamics there that influenced it, but our church was super young, most of them were in their 20s, a lot of single people. A lot of people who had some sort of church background but had been out of the church for a long time. We did not have a lot of like people showing up with baggage, like church baggage, but I think it's because we were so radically different. Like, I mean, not only were we a house church, but a house church led by a woman, that people like with baggage went and dealt with it somewhere else before they showed up with us. So, like a pretty healthy environment. I think there is so much room for development still with house church networks, right? And having that space where everybody came together once a month helped create common culture. I'm not sure it was quite enough. Somebody and I were dialoguing about this the other day. So here's things that, like, if somebody was going to explore this type of ministry, some things to consider. Yeah. One of the things we noticed, like only meeting in a large gathering once a month, there was people that never showed up to the large gathering. Like, they just liked the smaller environment. And once a month, I'm not sure we were able to do enough to create common language and common culture. in that
Okay.
once a month gathering. And I don't know if that was just the rhythm of once a month, or if there's something we could have done better and more intentionally in that space to create common culture. One of the other things with this type of ministry is people are creatures of habit. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have like a regular change agent built into the model, people will become insular and inward focused in their groups.
Yeah.
Like they'll just end up becoming these holy huddles.
Yeah.
So figuring out how do you build change into the regular rhythm to help make sure that they're always like inviting people, like how do you establish like healthy ground rules in those spaces so you can invite new people in, but they're still safe.
Right.
So we never quite truthfully, we never quite finished the recipe. Like it was great and I loved it, but there was a few of those things that we never quite figured out. And then when I decided it was time for me to be done, we worked really hard to find a new pastor for our church. I think we talked to 6 different individuals or couples who were all passionate about house church networks. They all wanted to go start their own, which is great for them, bad for me.
Yeah.
So I did I think I did 5 months where I did both. I led our church and served in this new role. And it was exhausting. So what we ended up doing, it was like middle of September. And I was just like, Lord, the cupboards are bare. Like, what do we do? Like, we've got this gathering and we weathered COVID really well in comparison, because it was like a different model. It was way more agile to change than a Sunday centric. Right.
Yeah.
So like we already were set up to do that. We were already like recording short teachings, like all that stuff already existed. So it was really easy for us to pivot and go online. And then we met outside. But it was like, I had taken this role with Foursquare, which I really felt like I was supposed to do. It wasn't like I'm feeling froggy and I had this option, so I jumped, right? It was like, I really felt like this is what the Lord was doing.
Yeah.
But I was like, I didn't want to, you always want to finish well. Yeah. Even if you're not finishing what you believe you set out to accomplish, like you have to stand before Jesus and your people and be like, I did the best I could, right? It's like probably the one piece of advice I always give to young leaders, like always finish well, because how you finish is how you are remembered.
Yeah, That's good. That's good.
So we ended up, long story short, in the middle of all this, we had built a friendship with an independent church plant in town led by a guy named Cody Whittington, who is he is a smarty smart pants, right? Like he's working on his PhD at Cambridge right now. And this is a guy living out in the middle of Montana. Yeah. So we had built a friendship over the course of a couple of years, and it had been a really, really interesting friendship. Like, and in the middle of all of it, he began exploring like baptism of the Holy Spirit. So we got to like pray with him and like have these ongoing conversations about what does that look like in your life. And it was just like this really like rich Christ-centered friendship that didn't have anything to do with our churches.
Yeah.
So then in the middle of all that, that church decided to become Foursquare. And so I got to help them become Foursquare. And then we were kind of like, I could not imagine merging our church with any other church. Like we had never really explored that, but I was like, if I was going to merge with anybody, it would be with Cody's church. Mm-hmm. So we probably spent 3 or 4 months like walking down that road together, and we involved our leadership team, and our leadership team like all got to like pray and fast as part of that process. So long story short, we did our first combined service that Christmas. So it was Christmas of, 2021. Yeah, that sounds right. But it tips a little more Sunday centric than us. It's breakfast church. Right. So we meet around tables, we share a meal. There's worship and a teaching and a discussion. So it ended up sort of being like the middle ground between the Sunday centric and what we were doing. Not all of our people made the transition. And that's just like the sad truth. And I still, and it's transitions, but it's also like, I think this is the other thing we have to like be aware of if we're going to do house church networks. And this is my fault, and I'll like own this. I made the model a sacred cow. Like this is the glory of all church gatherings. right?
Mm-hmm.
Of like, this is how, look at the amazing things we're accomplishing in this house church network, right? So I think there's people that didn't make the jump because we had elevated the model to a place it should never have gone.
Wow.
And there's the pastor's heart.
Yes,
Coming
I was about to say.
alongside, shepherding, and
still reconciling her story in the process. This is more therapy for you. You just didn't realize it. So,
dude, my life is just ongoing therapy all the time right now. But yeah, so I love house church networks. I think Sunday centric churches can be deeply discipling. I just think we have to be really honest with ourselves about what we're doing and be really thoughtful about all those spaces.
Yeah. Well, okay, so maybe this is more of that, and asking, because you mentioned you felt like it was incomplete, and I know you shared just now some of it was I put more emphasis on it, and therefore they didn't want to make the jump from that. Is there more to that when you say the model, or I don't think that's even how you said it, but it just wasn't. It wasn't. Maybe it sounds like unfinished business in some regards. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think when I say I don't think we quite finished the recipe.
There it is.
When I think of house church networks, like really what you have to figure out is how do you exist in perpetuity? Like how do you keep growing and changing and evolving over long periods of time? Right? Because when you think of like groups meeting in a home, like the average lifespan of that is about 24 months, right? It takes about 24 months for somebody to go through a major life transition and no longer be able to host, or they need a break, right? And just need to like not have people in their home for a while.
Yeah.
So a thriving house church network has to build in those regular rhythms of like consistent change, not just for your people, but for the leaders to have healthy rhythms. And then how does it exist for a long time and continue to invite more and more people in? We just don't have a lot of models of that yet. And so I think there's times where if I'm being honest with myself, I feel a little bit like I failed Foursquare, because like we were like sort of the first, right? And I, for better or for worse, like people would always call me and ask me how to do house church networks. And I'm like, bro, I'm like 3 years into this. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm just making it up as I go. But I do think I have moments where I'm like, what would it have been like had we kept going to be able to like really figure out those questions of longevity in this model, to be able to share that with other people. And now I'm at the point where we have other house church networks, and I'm like, now it's your job. And say that to them, like, now it's your job. You gotta finish the recipe. You gotta like ask these hard questions and figure out like, how do you keep doing this and have it be a place where people keep coming in, and keep going out to do new things, right? And have it exist for a long time, but continue to evolve and grow. It's a question we don't really have an answer for in house church networks yet.
Well, and going back to what you said earlier, it's also not how you're wired. I mean, you're not a maintainer. You're a starter. You get it going, and that's just more self-awareness. It's just not for me to figure out. I don't have your answer, kind of thing, but I can help you with what I have learned. And I can tell you, just having utilized a lot of what you guys did develop in our own context, you learned a lot, and it is a good starting point. And I don't know if you're still available for consulting. I don't put you on the spot and everything, but I know that I was inspired when I first heard you present it. So thank you for the obedience in that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm still like, truthfully, if anybody ever wants to talk about house church networks, they can call me like 100%, and I'll tell them what I've learned, and then I'll connect them with people who know more than I do, because thankfully we have that now, right? We have some other examples where they're continuing to like riff on what we did or what they're seeing in other spaces. And now we have like actual organizations that exist, like Creo Collective, that like their purpose is to help creative people figure out how do you do like collaborative transformational ministry.
Yeah.
Right. So thankfully there are some like really incredible resources. And so I think when I think about like the future of the church, I really do think it's more collaborative, more creative, and more missionally minded, right? It like sees the faces of the people in their town,
Yeah.
not just the walls of their building.
Yes. Well, and that was something that I'll be honest, really resonated with me spending time with you and your family, was how well you knew your neighbors, even though you hadn't been there at that point for very long. And not just your neighbors in your neighborhood, but even beyond that. And how that directly translates to, I mean, going back to how you defined ministry, right? That is the ministry. It's right there in front of you. And if you're not doing that, because missional is such a buzzword still, which is kind of funny when you think about it. But you've really put some context to it. I really appreciate that. I have a question. When we're talking about this model and we talk about things to keep in mind, what are some things maybe leaders should take pause with when considering pursuing this kind of ministry, or maybe even implementing something like this within their own context?
That is a great question. Things to consider. Well, I always think people should be planting churches. So I want to make sure that I put that out there, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think I love church planting. I still, like, we all got into church planting because once upon a time we heard a statistic of that's where, like, most new converts happen is in church plants, right? Like, that's why we all planted churches. And I don't necessarily think that's changed, right? Because you're talking about, like, a group of people who are actively looking to invite people into relationship, right? Because then when a church gets to like that critical mass, now it's like, now we focus on like serving the people inside and keeping them happy.
Yeah, right.
So that's my disclaimer to anything I'm going to say about House Church Network. But I think things that should cause pause. I think it's really important to consider like your own family's like needs. Like it made a big difference for Angela and I that our husbands worked full time, right? It's part of why I think like there are times where I think women can make amazing, phenomenal church planters. Because I do think sometimes the dynamics of a family, like life for women is a little more flexible. I guess that's a little bit of a sexist statement I just made, but I recognize that. But for us, like we were able to slow down enough to really determine what we felt like our community needed. Right. And I think that's true for any kind of church planting. Like I'll have a conversation with a church planter and they're like, I really want to do country worship. I'm like, I could care less what kind of worship you want to do. Like, who are the people in your community? What needs do they have? Where are you going to engage with them? So I think when I think of house church networks, I think there's a value in really being able to slow down and consider how do you, like, what would it look like in your community to invite people into relationship? Because when you think of cultures, there's warm cultures and cool cultures. And those things have to be taken into consideration. Like it took us a long time here to like build close relationships. And a lot of that is just Montana culture. Like Montana culture is like, I will help you out. I will come help you bring in your harvest, but that's still our fence line and don't cross it. Right. So I think really like understanding your community. Something else would be like don't overcook it, right? I think sometimes like with church planting or with house church networks, people can create this intricate structure before they even have any people. Like just invite some people into your home and see what happens.
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. And then the other thing is, and there's probably lots of things, but the other thing is I don't think you can do this kind of ministry if you're not willing to develop leaders and share power.
Yes.
Right. Because a lot of people love to talk about collaboration, but there's a lot of leaders, and I don't fault them for it, but there's a lot of leaders who are still very much wired with like this like mosaic, this like I'm Moses and I'm going to go up on the mountain. I'm going to hear from God and I'm going to come down and I'm going to tell everybody what we're going to do. Right.
Yeah.
I don't think you can do house church networks that way, because you are sharing, you're not just sharing leadership, you are entrusting people to pastor and care well for people in their groups. And that is dynamic, and you will have people in your groups who won't stop talking. You'll have people in your groups who don't get along. You'll have people in your groups that create an unsafe environment for other people. And you've got to not just trust leaders to handle that, but you have to do the work to develop them to navigate that well, or you will end up with weird, unhealthy culture in house churches. So you have to be willing to be deeply collaborative and do the work to develop your leaders to be able to navigate that kind of dynamic, changing environment.
I think that you can pull that out of the house church and just put it into leadership ministry, period. Because that's right on. You're absolutely right. And it starts with you. And if you're not willing to invest and raise up, also dies with you, right? So looking ahead then for leaders, and we're talking about resiliency and long-term, just stick-to-itness. Maybe that's the wrong word or wording of saying it, but you've talked a lot about too, and you've drawn back to this as far as health and long-term health. Speak to us about that, especially when we're talking about ministry without hating it for the long haul.
It's a great question.
Thank you. It's almost as if you told me to set you up that way. It's so weird.
You're so smart. You are just so smart. So
it's behind the scenes.
I've been doing this for 25 years, and I feel like that's a little bit of time. I mean, you're right. It's not, you sit with a Joe Whitwer or somebody like that, and they're telling you about their 50 years of ministry longevity is just like phenomenal. But like in my time, I have walked through burnout twice. Okay. So once was I grew this big youth group, and it was just sheer madness, truthfully. Like junior high ministry is just organized chaos.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. But I was eating and dreaming and sleeping and breathing youth ministry and doing all of that while trying to do my master's. And I was just tired. I was just really tired. And then the second time was about 18 months into our church plant. And I found myself just wanting to do bad things, like my husband. And I talked to my husband about it. He's a nurse. He's like, what you're describing is when teenagers want to have a diabetic holiday, right? Like a teenager that was diagnosed with diabetes as a kid, they just want a weekend off where they can just go eat and do whatever they want. And so I found myself, like, you name it. Like I wanted to clean out our bank account and buy $10,000 worth of clothes and buy a Vespa that seats one and ride off into the sunset.
Yeah.
And so I, thankfully, in both of those cases, like I never went off the rails. In the first one, I quit my job. I gave him 8 months notice. I still finished well, but I quit because I just needed to be done. And the second one, and this is probably around the time you came to visit, I strapped on my running shoes and I was running like 30 or 40 miles a week. I mean, because I had to burn that adrenaline or it was going to come out sideways. Mm-hmm. But in all of that time, like I think back on all of that time and kind of where I'm at now, and the job I'm in right now is like, it's fairly demanding and fairly stressful, but there's a couple things that I think that I've learned in that time. And the first is we have to be aware that we are not responsible for saving people. It is so easy to take on ourselves this savior complex, right? So like, if I don't do it, it's not going to happen and the sky is going to fall and people are going to go to hell, right? Like we are not Jesus.
Yep.
And the second one is, and this is just, I mean, it is our consumer culture bleeds into everything that we do, but we are at risk of constantly comparing ourselves to other people. Right? Like, does my church look like the church down the street? Or does my house church network look like so-and-so's house church network, right? Or am I doing a good job as an associate supervisor that so-and-so is doing better at something in another district? Like, no matter what role you have in ministry, you will do those things if you are not consciously aware and preventing yourself from doing that. And I think the solution is a couple things. One is like stepping into this deep space of presence with the Lord and a convergence. Like, this is who I am. This is what the Lord is doing in my life. What he's doing in me is probably also what he wants to do through me. And really being present in that space. That, like, I matter to God, I'm important to him, I'm unique in who I am, and I am okay as me, right?
Yeah.
The other half of that is coming to terms with the fact that we're not that important. I'm just not that important.
Yeah.
If I quit my job, Foursquare would have my job posted in the next 10 days for somebody else to apply for.
Faster, but yes. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Like,
quicker.
I'm just not that important. You know, and so being able to, like, live in the freedom of that creates this space where I can co-work with God. I can still work really hard. But I can also, like, find great joy in, like, the work of my hands, knowing that, like, God's the big worker. You know, like, he's the big worker with the real tools. I'm just like the kid that he hands the toy hammer to and says, come alongside me and help me in the work that I'm already doing. And so I think there's a lot of freedom in coming to a place where we can reconcile within ourselves that we're just not that important.
It's so I'm humming because in my dark spaces I can get to the spot of almost flying the other direction of, well, okay, you can have it, you can just have this, like, you know, and so
Peace.
guarding yourself, because it'd be really easy to go, yeah, I'm in the grand scheme, it doesn't matter, you know. I'm serving at a church that's, you know, I think we're in our 93rd year or something like that, so there's already history here, and it's like, well, like you said, when I'm done, they'll just be somebody else. So, you know, what does it matter? It's guarding yourself against that in the hurting spaces. Let's put it that way. Against, you know, that can actually work against you. But it's great perspective when you are in it, because then you're right, it is that freedom of, well, at the end of the day, it's not mine. It's mine to manage, but it's not mine, and I'm not the one that makes it go, basically. And all I'm asked for is the obedience in that. And
well, remember, I'm an Enneagram 3.
Yeah.
Too, right? Like, so my value, if I'm not careful, my value comes from my ability to accomplish things,
right,
to appear successful, to provide some sort of valuable contribution. Right. And so I agree. I think the balance in all of this is, like, did I do what Jesus asked me to do?
Yeah.
Did I do it to the best of my ability? If I compared it to so-and-so, I'm not going to feel great about what I did, because the truth is most of the other associate supervisors are amazing and way better at this job than I am, right? But what I'm saying is, it is okay to step back and be okay in your own skin.
Yeah.
Because Jesus cares more about who I am than what I do. And so at the end of the day, I want to feel like I worked hard today. I did what Jesus asked me to do. And I can trust that his plan is going to work out. That he is still bringing reconciliation into the world, both in the little town of Bozeman and beyond. Right? That he is working out his plans and purposes in the lives of all the pastors that I have the privilege of serving. But ultimately, he cares more about who I am than what I do. Right? Yeah. And in that space, I can have such deep, rich fulfillment in ministry, because I know that I'm doing what Jesus asked me to do. And he's the one who's going to grow it, right? Like, it's his Holy Spirit that's going to bring transformation in the lives of people. But I can have deep satisfaction in knowing that I've been obedient.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. All right. So we'll get you out on this one. And this is not necessarily it's a combination of questions. I was just listening to you, but I'm curious. It's easy to ask, you know, what encourages you or inspires you about ministry right now moving forward. But I'm curious, within that same vein, what keeps you going, or it's inspiring you. So it's not, like you said, feeling froggy to do something else. But what keeps you going that maybe others could pull from what you've learned as you move forward in ministry?
I think there's the heart stuff, like we have to have like our own thriving relationship with Jesus that doesn't have anything to do with ministry. Yeah. And if we're not careful, the two things will weave themselves together. And so we have to like actively work to pull those two things apart, right? Like, so we have a relationship with Jesus that exists apart from ministry. Mm-hmm. So there's that piece, right? But I also think like, man, I just like love seeing people's lives changed. I really, really do. And for me, that looks a little different now in this season. Like in this role, like my fruit grows on other people's trees. Yeah. I'm one big step removed from the local church ministry, but even getting to like work with pastors and leaders to help them like see themselves the way that Jesus does, but then to do the work to really have like really great leadership, to lead really, really well, like to lead from like a deep place of the Spirit moving in their lives, and then create structures where other people can do that in their context, right? Like it's one thing to have a great lead pastor, but man, wouldn't it be great to have a really amazing leadership team? Mm-hmm. Like the incredible like synergy of that type of collaboration. So getting to like lovingly challenge pastors forward, like hopefully, like Jesus, please, hopefully that's challenging churches forward. Yeah. And so when I think about like what keeps me going, it's seeing those things, even in the hard stuff, right? Like even in like, if unfortunately, like when you have a pastor who's made a poor choice, like, or just done something dumb in leadership, like being able to see that not just restored, but like better. Like you want to see people better. You want to leave people better than you find them. Yeah. And so if I can leave somebody better than I found them, it inspires me to like keep going for sure.
Well, it goes back to what you said. I wrote it down. Where I go should look like the kingdom. Yeah. And that's what you're doing. You helping bring, we like to say, bringing wholeness, basically. And that may look different for everybody in every context. And so that's good. Molly, this has been refreshing. Yeah. And it's just been great. Number one, to catch up with you, but also you followed us on all the tangents, and I gotta say, good on you for that one. You caught Brendan off guard. He couldn't even get it out. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad to hear it. That's good. Glad to hear that's fun. But once again, thank you for your time. Thank you for just being you and being transparent within this. I know this is going to speak to a lot of people, so thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. Well, it was an honor. Thanks for letting me serve with you today.
Well, thank you for joining us again for another episode of Ministry Without Hating It. We hope it's helped you take a step further towards loving what you do through the wisdom of others. If you'd like to connect with our guests further, we've made ways to do so available in the episode show notes. And if you'd like to connect with us further, support the podcast, or sign up for any show updates, just go to withouthatingit.com to get started. And don't forget to subscribe to Ministry Without Hating It wherever it is that you get your podcast so you don't miss out on our future episode releases. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time. That's good. I'm on the train. It's good. We're going to cut I'm on the train. That sounded so... Who am I? Anyway, what's even happening here? I have one of my really good friends. He says that all the time, but the way he says it, he can pull it off. I cannot. So there we go. I am not on the train of on the train. Neat.
There's just silly business.